Good morning, good afternoon. I think I'm actually releasing this video just out of boredom. I have nothing better to do and nowhere to go. There's nothing happening around me, nothing worthwhile. So I'm going to talk about magic. I'm going to talk about magic. Where did the magic go? Where did the magic go? If you read the Bible, and I think I might have to limit it to the Bible because the direction I initially wanted to go might get me into trouble or expose things that I shouldn't be speaking about. So let me stick to the Bible. In the beginning, when God made man, one of the things that he allowed Adam to do, or the instructions that God gave Adam to do, was to name each and every animal on the earth. Each and every animal on the earth, which means that he gave animals identity. He gave animals direction from that identity. He gave them the ability to be seen by him, to be touched by him, to be acknowledged by him. He acknowledged them, and in turn, they also acknowledged him. We know and we understand that God had given Adam authority, power, rulership over the birds, the beasts on the land, and the fish in the sea, the fish and every creature in the sea included. He gave him authority and he gave him the ability to name them. In naming something, you have power over it. You give it a description. And I also do believe in that moment he gave them direction in that naming exercise, but perhaps not necessarily so. It's just something that's come to my mind. But anyway, so you find Eden to have been something of a magical place where, for one, God worked with Adam. That in itself is magic. Two, Ezorte, the splendor of the earth was revealed to Adam. And it was given unto him that he had power, rulership, and kingship over all things that God had made. That is also magic. All things on the earth or under the earth or under his feet were under his stewardship. There were stewards. In their innocence, the Lord is saying, they saw God's glory firsthand. In their innocence, they saw God's glory firsthand. They saw all things, including the creatures that God had made. Erdoje Pradie, and how Ishkort Mardiglabra Ardo. There's something else in the room here with me. Anyway, so they saw God's glory. They saw God's hand. They saw God's move. They saw and they heard God's voice. They saw God's magic in all creation. And Adam, if you believe the story, saw God's creative mysteries firsthand when out of his rib, his wife was created. He awoke and he saw his partner for life. He saw God create for him a partner that is powerful. He saw God creating for him a partner. I actually don't know if Adam prior to that had seen God creating anything Well, he didn't see him first time because he was asleep. But he saw before going to sleep that there was nothing by him. He went to sleep, he woke up, and then something was created from him. So he saw God's hand one of the mysteries I have now, having said that Adam awoke, having not seen his wife next to him, went to sleep and woke to find that creation had been erdoja, marhir cobra ardeji ara. I'm seeing confusion somewhere. That creation had come to life before him. He went to sleep alone. He awoke and found Eve standing next to him. So God, in his sleep, created Eve on his behalf, and he awoke to her presence, and he acknowledged her, and he was blessed for the most part. We know what happened after that, but in that moment, he saw magic, he saw creation before him. And I was actually now trying to establish within myself to say, could we have been in a position to see God creating? Could we stand it spiritually to see God make all things before us? Because in that moment, he had to go to sleep. And I do not envisage or believe, and I might be taking my scriptures or my knowledge of scriptures may be a little bit unclear, that he did not actually see prior to that God create anything. Because after everything was created, then he made man. So beyond Eve, he had not seen creation or God creating or seen the magic of how creation could come into existence. And I actually now wonder if it is possible one of the mysteries of today is how all things began. How did things start? What was the, actually, I don't even know how to put it into words, but what was it like for God when all things were being made? What was it like for God when all things were being made? Could we, as men, have partaken of that creation? Could we have seen God create in the way that he created all things? Why was man created last and not first? My speaker keeps cutting. Why was man created last? Why was man created last? Why wasn't man first created? And then from that, being exposed to what God was creating and how God was creating it. Why was man not part of creation? Why did we come onto the earth once everything was made? Yes, there's still a blessing to have received all things that were made because everything was made for us. But having all things made for us, why were we not part of the process of creation? Because again, as I was saying, one of the mysteries of today is how did the world come into existence? How did all things come into existence? Obviously, those of us who read the scriptures would know that God spoke and everything was. That God spoke and everything was. That's the answer to the mystery, really. But science obviously wants a scientific explanation, which truly there isn't one. But beyond what science might be trying to discover, we as men and as spirits and as God's extensions, why were we not a part of that initial creation? Why would we not have been given the privilege to seeing all other things being created and partake of it, and then have then been put onto that creation as being a part of the process and not being part of the finished work? Obviously, the Lord is saying that His glory, we would not withstand it. His glory would not withstand it. And here then is the true revelation thereof. Because God's glory was extended and expanded throughout His creation. And we know very well, even in today's best application, we cannot see or partake fully of the glory of the Lord, nor the glory of the Father. Yes, their spirits are in us. Yes, we can encounter their presence, see them, hear them, follow their instructions. But God's glory, even in the Old Testament, you would know in the time of Moses, when Moses asked God to show him his glory, and God says that no one has seen my face and lived. No one has seen my face and lived. And I believe that is also a part of the reason why we were not part of the initial constructs and thoughts behind the initial creation, is that God used his glory to make all things, and all things were a reflection of God's glory. That God used his glory to create all things, and all things were part of God's glory. And we know that we cannot see it. But in our innocence, I believe we partook of that initial glory that God had used to make all things. That initial glory that God had used to make all things. In our innocence, when we were still covered in the garden, we partook of it. But then we also then understand that once we fell, that glory was removed from us, which means that there is, because I'm speaking about magic now, there is a way to see that glory again. Yes, we can speak about righteousness and we can speak about what has been restored through Christ. But if we can turn back time to that moment, to that event, to that instance within the garden, I think it is possible to see the glory of the Father in his creation once again. And potentially it is even possible, perhaps a far-fetched possibility, but a possibility nevertheless to access the magic, if we can call it magic, the essence, the magic, the merit or the extension of God in us that we had in the garden with all that was around Adam and Eve, in how they were to men so kebre English kerodovra ande. Somebody is doing something. And I don't know if it is about this word because this word is not that deep. So I'm wondering where this attack is coming from. I'm curious myself, but let me carry on speaking. Perhaps it shall be revealed in itself. But I believe we can partake of that glory once again because our innocence has been restored if we believe, if we have faith. Therefore, that which we had with the Lord, our God in the garden, that magic, if I can call it magic, that essence, that extension of God's glory that we had around us in the garden, can and should be restored. That is my thought. I mean, we are no longer fallen, nor sin has fallen by God. And we understand that once the garden was removed from us, or we were kicked out of it, then all the secrets thereof were also abandoned. But we can go back. Is that not right? Is it not possible? Should we not be able to? We can go back. We can be restored back to that glory where we can see all things from God's point of view and reflect God from that perspective, seeing God in all things and all things seeing God in us, seeing God in all things and all things seeing God in us. We lost our innocence. We lost our magic. We lost our essence. And we even know now with the new creation that all of creation is waiting for the manifestations of the sons of God. I believe that a part of that manifestation is included in what was a part in that initial part of creation, where again we saw God in all things, and all things saw God in us. We reflected God into all things, and all things reflected God into us. That was the walk in the garden. That was the message of the garden. And God had made all things for us, and all things received instructions from us because we were given authority over it. We were given power over it. And we saw that even in what I would say to be an extension of the garden, which was Christ. We know in the origin of the construct of all things, trees were given a certain instruction to bear fruits. And we know the Lord when he came to a fig tree and the fruits were not there, even though the season had come, he instructed the tree to die because it was not revealing in itself that which it was created for, and the death came upon it. We can see from that extension, again, Christ in my mind is an extension of the garden and all things of the garden concerning power and authority and rulership that we initially had. He was the restoration of it, even the glory, because we know Christ to be the glory of the Lord. So even the glory was a part of him and a reflection of that which God had initially instructed or had put in man in the garden. He reflected that. So when he spoke to the tree and the tree died, he actually could have spoken the reverse, mind you. I think in that moment he may have spoken out of his anger, though some people might say Christ or God does not really get angry, but he can. He could have instructed the tree to bear much fruit. That could have been an instruction. But because he expected, hmm, he anticipated and he expected the tree to have, from the origin of its construct, to bear good fruits in due season. That because it was not already doing so, that it should be cut off. And we understand the metaphors thereof concerning man and our giftings and our salvation, that those of us who are not bearing fruits, that's another preaching for another day, would also be cut off. So he was, in essence, perhaps extending the metaphor. And maybe even us in the garden, that we were no longer able to bear the fruits that the Lord had instructed for us to bear, to be fruitful and to multiply. Perhaps in that moment, once we had fallen, we had also removed the original instructions that we were given concerning the. Nevertheless, so magic was lost, or the essence of God's extension to the earth through us men had been lost or taken away. You don't have to listen to this word today. I'm just talking. I am just talking. So you need not have to stay. There's no particular word. I just felt the need to babble. So I believe that magic was lost. What did you feel, Ashley? Hey, and welcome. I believe that initial magic, that and magic to me would then be an extension of God's glory. That us in our full glory, in the glory of the Lord, are an extension of that magic that Adam and Eve once had. And again, with that magic, gives us the ability to see God in all things, and all things to see God in us. And we, as God, moving with all things seeing God in us, would fully reflect the Father. And creation will begin to minister to us the way God had instructed it to minister to us. And we would minister to it the way that God had instructed us initially to minister to it. Again, I believe all of those things were lost. Adam's ability to speak and to have instruction and authority over creatures, over the earth, over all things created was lost. And likewise, the ability for all creatures, all creation, to follow the instructions of Adam through Adam was also lost. Because we do not really see, once he came out of the garden, that instruction that he had been given rulership, power, and authority over the birds, over the beasts, and over the fish. That was never really not until the time of Noah and the boat, when all things were then called back, but for a different reason. For a different reason. Prior to that, the authority given to man to speak to all creatures and all creatures to listen to him was, in my opinion, lost, or it was not at the same place that was expected at the beginning. But nevertheless, so that was the loss. But we have gained all that which has been lost in Christ. All that which was lost has been restored. So my question is, in this day and age, having all things restored, should we not be able to speak and instruct and have control over all creatures and over all creation? Should all creation not acknowledge God in us? And should we not acknowledge God in all things? Because we know that the invisible attributes of God are made visible in all of his creation. So we know and we understand that with the eyes of the Father, we can see his glory in all things. With the eyes of the Father and his Spirit within us, we can see and acknowledge the glory of his Spirit in all things. And we know that everything takes instruction from God. So if all these things now, having been restored in their true image of their existence, their true essence, and we can acknowledge that, and they can acknowledge God in us, should our authority and power over all creation not also have been restored and have increased? And if so, in what way should we be manifesting that? In what way should we be manifesting that? We know from the Messiah's point of view, again, him being the extension of Eden itself, the extension of heaven in reality, because the Lord just gave me an instruction that Eden was the doorstep to heaven. It wasn't heaven itself, as I once thought, but Eden was a doorstep to heaven itself. It was almost like the gateway to it. It was almost like the gateway to it. Irar dobra ande. Morjar dabra askimbride. The Lord is asking one of you to restore your relationship with your daughters by the Spirit. To restore your relationship with your daughters by the Spirit, which means pray for them. Having prayed for them, let God show you how to speak to them so that your relationship can be restored to your daughters by the Spirit. Nevertheless, so having that magic, that essence, that extension of God's wisdom, glory, and power restored, should our authority have not increased exponentially, or at least being restored to what we had initially, or even greater, as that the revelation of all things has come to us. So we should understand all things because God's Spirit is in us and He explains all things to us. We are like God, as we were initially created to be in the image and likeness of God. And being like God, should we not know how to instruct all things the way that God had instructed them? And should all things not be listening to us in that same light, in that same glory? Should we not be seeing the glory of God in all things? And should all things not see the glory of God in us and receive instruction? Again, I was gonna say and give the image and the thought of Christ Himself, how He walked. I was going to give the example of how Christ Himself walked. Again, Him being the extension of Eden and heaven and so much more. That how the tree again listened to Him, the tree that died in His presence, or according to His word, that He walked on the waters and the waters carried Him, that He spoke to the winds and the winds subsided, and He could do so much more. And we could even speak about how Elijah spoke to the clouds, spoke to the rains, and the drought came. And when the time of drought had come fully, then he spoke again to the heavens that the rains should once again begin to flow. And according to his word, the rains came back. And we can speak to Joshua, who during the battle, having encountered his enemies, wanted the daylight to continue, that they might be victorious. And he spoke to the sun or to the earth, whichever way, and the earth began to stop, to move, to stop rotating around the sun. And therefore they were victorious from it. Joshua, who stopped the sun, or who stopped the earth, whichever way you want to look at. Or we can speak about Moses, who split the Red Sea. Or we can speak about Elijah again, who parted the seas, or parted the waters, that he may walk upon the dry land. And how the priests also did that thereafter. And how his disciple at the time, Elisha, also did that thereafter. There's many parts in the Bible or in scripture that our capabilities are kind of exposed to us as to what is possible because of God in us. What is possible. And that also goes obviously to the miracles that were performed. But the miracles might be a story for another time. Just us in nature, us in creation, and that glory within us that was once lost. Are we accessing that? Can we speak to the winds when a hurricane comes, when a tornado comes? Can we speak to the seas when tsunamis are about to ravage the lands? Can we speak to the earthquakes to be calm, to be quietened? Can we speak to the clouds to be removed on cloudy days? Can we speak to the rains to subside when they are about to cause flooding? Can we walk upon the waters, clean the waters? Can we speak to winds? Can we speak and create rainbows at will, if we wanted, if we wished? I was seeing a rainbow earlier, and we appreciate rainbows so much. Could we not, for a day, create a rainbow and see it in the sky, knowing that we're the ones who released the words to do so? Is it possible? Can we do it? Should we be doing it? Can we speak to animals? And I don't mean dogs who are trained to hear our voices, but to any creature, telling it to come and it would come, telling it to bow and it would bow, telling it to go and it would go, purely out of words, purely out of power, purely out of the authority that we have. Can we speak to all things and all things listen? Can we listen to the stars and hear what voices are within them and what they have to say? Because understand all things are spirit and all things are spiritually discerned, which means if God created all things by his words, all things are spirit, which means you can speak to the stars, you can speak to the trees, you can speak to the waters. Jesus spoke to the tree. Jesus walked on the waters. Jesus spoke to the wind. Joshua spoke to the sun. Moses, Elijah, and the priests spoke to the waters, and the waters were split. Do we know the authority and the power that we have? Or have all things just become parts of storytelling and fairy tales? Or is there truth in it? Is there power in it? And are we accessing that power that we once had? Have we lost the magic fully? If so, can it not once again be restored? Can we not walk in that magic, walk in that power, walk in that authority? Should that story not have begun once again, exploring the abilities that we can and should have, exploring the magic, the glory of God in us that we can and should have? Should it not be an extension of God's power and God's hand? If so, we know what God's hand has done. At his hand and at the stretching of his hand, the universe was made. Do we have the power to create even a universe, even one star, even a rock? The devil, in pursuing the Messiah when he was hungry, asked him, why not turn this stone into bread? Does even the devil acknowledge and know the power that we have? The shortfall that we have is that we're not trying, or we're not giving ourselves the ability, at least a chance to try. Create a rainbow. Somebody, anybody, create a rainbow. Release a word that you're going to create a rainbow and see it being created. And having seen it, know that that rainbow came from your very words, from your very authority, from your very power. Let me repeat that again because it seems I must cut. Somebody create a rainbow. Create a rainbow and know and acknowledge that this rainbow came out of your words, from your authority, from your power, from your ability, knowing that this was which God had envisaged when He made man, God over all things. Create a rainbow just because you can. Release a word for it. Speak to the trees. Let them acknowledge your voice. Let them acknowledge your presence. Give them an instruction. Speak to the birds. Let them see you. Let them be defined by you. Let them know that God sees them through you and that their glory may at least also begin to shine and acknowledge God in you because all of creation is waiting for it. The manifestations of the sons of the living God or the children of the Most High. Speak to the waters if needs be. If the waters in your city are being poisoned, you know them. Like Elijah pouring the salt, receive an instruction from the Lord to speak to the waters, and the waters shall be restored. They shall be sweet and healthy and worthy to be drank. Speak to the waters. Speak to your eyes, you who wears glasses, to be restored, to have full vision, to see things the way that they ought to be seen, in perfect clarity. Speak to the waters, speak to the seas, speak to the flowers, speak to the bees. Let them acknowledge you for who you are, and let yourself acknowledge you for what it is that you carry. You carry God in you. How will these things be instructed by God? Because God is in you now. God is in you now. God is with you. How would all these things react to God as God walked on the earth? Because you're an extension of God's glory. You're an extension of God's hand. The way they would react to God is the way they should be reacting to you. The way creatures react to God is the way they should be reacting to you. The way creation reacts to God is the way creation should be creating. Zekombra are. The Lord says you should be creating by now. You have the ability, you have the power, you have the knowledge thereof. You know what God can do. And by faith, all things are possible in and through those who believe. What is your faith asking you to do? Speak to the trees. If the world is worried about deforestation and trees dying, speak to the trees, manifest them, create them, watch them grow, not over years, but in a day. I am speaking the impossible, but you should at least hear the impossible and let your faith carry and make them possible. Peter walking on the water was impossible. Somebody doing it and made it possible. So somebody has to do it and make them possible. Speak to a tree, create a tree, let it grow within a day, and acknowledge the Lord of God, the word of God in you. Speak to the sky and create a rainbow. Let the rainbow be created. Acknowledge the word of God and the power of your words in you. Speak to the sky. If it's on a rainy day and you wish to see the sun, tell the clouds to move that you may see the glory of the sun and acknowledge the sun and the sun acknowledging you. Do you have the ability? You should. Do you have the spirit? You should. Do you have the time? You should. Do you have the authority? You should. God has given us all things. All things were made for us here on the earth. They belong to God, which means they belong to us because we're His children. Again, the way everything do this, as a matter of fact. See God moving amongst His creation and envisage what creation would do in the presence of the Creator, how it would react. Again, when the Lord spoke to the tree listened because it knew the authority in God through Christ. And Christ knew the authority that He had in God to that tree. He spoke to the tree, it listened. He spoke to the winds, they listened. He spoke to the waters, and He walked upon them, they listened. And whatever else He did, because many things that He did do were not recorded. Speak to the birds, understand what they say, know that they're there for you, giving you instruction, showing you the way of the Lord. Speak to the trees, speak to the waters. Even with that, you can speak to the cars and prevent accidents. I've done that many a time with accidents occurring, and I've spoken a word that accident should not happen. You can speak to the cars, you can speak to the people within the cars, you can speak to the robots, the traffic lights, as you would call them. You can speak to the roads, that wherever blood is supposed to be shed, they will be cleansed, and that it will not happen. You can speak to the guns, that the person who's about to fire it, either against somebody or against themselves, that nothing would come out, and they would have a moment to think twice. You can speak to the thieves, speak to the rapists, speak to the murderers, to have a change of thought, to have a change of mind. You can speak to the children who seem abandoned and can feel the spirit of love upon their hearts, not knowing where it is coming from, but somewhere is released in the atmosphere and spoken love into the atmosphere. Love is the most powerful creation or element on the earth because God Himself is love. So you can speak love out of your spirit, and love can begin to flow. And people find themselves in the spirit of love, not knowing where it is coming from, but understanding that love is affecting them and show itself around them. You can be love as God is love and extend it and expand it to others, through others. Speak love. You are the light. Did you know that a time will come when the sun itself would pass away and the only light of the world will be the Lord Himself, where He is the essence and the true light, and all men would know the light that He is. That same light you are. You are the light of the world, the literal light of the world. You are the light of the world. There is light inside of you. Speak it, let it shine, and people will acknowledge the light of God. And the light of God is not like the sun. The light of God is not like the sun. The light of God is not like the sun. There's a revelation there. Perhaps in time I will reveal it when I see it for myself. But it is not the same. There's something more eternal to it, more healing to it, more powerful to it, more instructive to it. There's an instruction in that light that God has made you. And when you understand that light, you'll understand the God within you the more. But be a light, nevertheless, in dark places. To the child that is losing hope, to the woman who wants to think of suicide, to the husband who is about to commit whatever he's about to do. You can speak light over them, and your light will shine over whatever they're going through. Speak light. Again, you can speak to the cars that you see in your dreams that are about to be in accidents. and tell them to change direction. And you can save somebody's life. You can speak to the building, speak to the bridge that is about to fall, that it would fall when nobody is upon it. You can speak the thunders, the lightning, that the damage would be lessened, that the person that they might hit that day would be avoided just by speaking to it. Would you allow God to reveal to you things which are beyond nature, that you have the ability and power to have control over? Could you ask God, and would you allow God to reveal in you what you can and possibly do and should be doing? Speaking to the seas, can God ask you to pray, knowing that the prayers you release can change a whole neighborhood, change a whole city? Would you believe it in your heart that you have the ability to do so, to speak the minds and hearts of men, and men will turn their hearts to God, even from a distance, to speak the hearts and minds of young men and women growing up, that love will begin to emanate from them, that God's Spirit will begin to utter and usher them into something new? Could you speak a word in the prophetic, prophesying to the stars, and the stars prophesying to the young, that gifts may begin to be activated by your word? Do you understand that authority? Do you believe that it is possible? Can you speak healing over animals, that even vets would be put out of business because even animals be healed by your hand? Can you speak to the babies, unborn children, that the mothers who are thinking of abortion would hear the voice of the Spirit within them, telling them there is a better way, asking them to choose better? Could you speak on their behalfs? Could you give them the voices? I'm just saying, could you? Can you? Should you? What is your level of faith? Are you limiting it to what you have seen, to what you have heard? Or would you give God some leeway, allowing Him to express His faith in you, the way that He sees Himself, in His faith, in His abilities, and having those abilities being an extension of Him to you and of you to Him? Can you be God's hand? Speak to a tree and see it being created, that man would see it the next day and wonder, when did this happen? How did this occur? You can restore magic on the earth. You can restore the essence of God back to creation. The people would be in awe and in wonder to say, surely there is a mystery here. And you can reveal where that mystery is coming from by your hand, through your words, acknowledging the Father in and through you. But do you have the faith to do so? Create a rainbow. Speak to the tree. Know that it is possible. Speak the rains. Speak the droughts. Know that it is possible. Speak the accidents. Speak the earthquakes. Know that it is possible. Speak the tsunamis, to the hurricanes, to the stars, to all of creation, knowing that it is possible. If you believe, if you believe, speak the way God speaks. The Spirit is saying, Speak the way God speaks. See yourself in God's place and see how He would react, what He has the ability to do, and do it. See what God has the ability to do and do it. See what God has the ability to do and do it. As I'm speaking these words, I know somebody's eyes are beginning to open, questioning, am I doing enough? Should I be doing more? Am I doing enough? Should I be doing more? Am I doing enough? Should I be doing more? That is the essence of God in you. You can and you should be doing more. And you should not be limiting God to what you think God can do. Allow God to show you, to teach you, to be a part of His creative power, to be a part of His magic, His essence, His greatness, His glory. Allow yourself to be a part of God, to be His God hand extended, to be His God hand extended, to be like God, to move like God, to see like God, to create like God, to have faith in the way that God is in Himself, to do all things where all things are possible. Be like God. Be like God. Be like God. Create a rainbow. I'll keep emphasizing it until somebody believes it and does it. Create a rainbow. Create a tree. Let it grow overnight. Let others be surprised and believe that God still exists. That God still exists. Do something to get people to actually wonder, to actually question, to actually think about it. Are all things possible? Be their possibility. Show them that it is possible. Peter walked on the waters because he saw that, for one, somebody was doing it, and two, that person gave him the reason and the purpose to also follow suit, and he did so. Inspire somebody with the magic, the extension of God within you, to do something extraordinary, that men shall begin once again to know and acknowledge that truly God exists, and we know He does because of the things that we do in and through Him and for Him. Be the hand of God extended, be like God. Be the hand of God extended, be like God. Be magic. Do something magical. Do something godlike. That is the essence of the true essence of the origin of magic itself. Doing something godlike, not with tricks, not with masks, not with wires, but the true essence of God's faith to create, to do, to be magic, to be all things, to be glorified. Be the hand of God extended. Be the glory of the Father. Be like the glory of the Son. Be like the glory of the Spirit, all of whom are with you and for you. Do something magical. Do something creative. Do something powerful. Do something powerful. Do something powerful. Believe you can. And show yourself that it is possible. Believe you can. And show yourself that it is possible. Do something that will have you believing in God once again. Not from what you have heard, but what you have seen and experienced. Not from what you have heard, but from what you have seen and experienced firsthand with God, for God, by God, through God. God exists. Show that He does. God exists. Show the world that He does. God exists. Show the world that He does. Do something magical. Do something godlike. Do something magical. Do something godlike. Thank you for listening. Be blessed.